Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our weekly program on the Spirit's teachings. You may ask, what Spirit teachings? Where do I find those teachings? Well, dear friends, they are incorporated in the Gospel according to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. Most of the chapters have at the end a section that's entitled The Spirit's Teachings, which are commentaries by spirits, some of whom we know by name, like Hahnemann, the Apostle Paul, and others. And others we don't know very well, but they give us great counsel. They embellish on the subject matter of almost every chapter in the gospel. So today we're inviting you to the study of chapter 15. Chapter 15 is one of our most favorite chapters. It's entitled, Without Charity, There Is No Salvation. Once we've reached this chapter, once we've reached now this particular maxim, we're at the core of Jesus's teachings. And not only Jesus's teachings, but also what he's modeled to us from the cradle to the grave. Let us remember, and Emmanuel reminds us of this in Thought and Life in one of the chapters, that Jesus modeled to us humility where he was born, in the manger among the animals, the barn animals. And he was killed, so to speak, and hung on the cross among common thieves. Again, humility. And of course, in between the cradle and the grave, there was more humility. And humility is one of the main ingredients in order to be charitable. So, dear friends, let us begin. The Spirit's teachings are only one item. So in order to tie it into the chapter, today we will be just briefly summarizing the chapter and then read item 10, which is by the Apostle Paul. Hi, Teresa. Thank you so much for joining, dear friend. Thank you. So let me share the screen so we have a little bit of a visual. Press the wrong button. Apologies, friends. Here we go. It's always nice to have a little bit of a visual so that we can even take an image if there's something that sticks out. It can never hurt to have this. All right, so here, Spirit's teachings, we're finding ourselves in chapter 15, and we'll be focusing on item 10, but before that, we will be summarizing the chapter just briefly. So without charity, there is no salvation, is all of Jesus's morals summed up. It sums up all of his moral teachings, his modeling. It's all about charity and humility. And we just spoke about the humility that was even displayed through the place of his birth. So this is now we've reached the core of Spiritism, the core of Jesus, what he was all about: charity, humility. In this particular item 1.1, he talks about the proverbial final judgment that we all are exposed to at some point, most likely after our incarnation. And this final judgment is only based on one thing, namely our practice of charity. The teachings in all of what we're learning is actually very simple. We've reached it. This is the bottom line. Everything else is almost like icing on the cake. And yet we have the hardest time with it here on earth. And we individually too. It is so hard not to be selfish. And it comes out through little things here and there, and then also in the big picture. So, humility, charity is, or should be, or is hopefully our main focus in our lives, because the so-called final judgment is based on our practice of charity. Charity is the sole, and we're saying it again, the sole condition for our salvation. Nothing else. Everything is included in charity. Charity is the virtue of all virtues. The virtue of charity includes all the other virtues. It's the pinnacle. Jesus' principle, namely, you shall love God with all your soul and your neighbor as yourself, we've heard many times. And we know we cannot love our neighbors if we don't love God. And we can't love God if we don't love our neighbors. So the key for us is to love God via our neighbors. And our neighbors, we're invited to see the term neighbor in the widest scope. It's not just our family members, our family of blood. It's not our friends or actual neighbors only. It's everyone. Everyone is a neighbor of ours. We're all children under one God. We're all brothers and sisters. And above and beyond that, we also, the animals and plants are also our neighbors. Planet Earth is our neighbor. Everything is. So we're invited to be charitable and loving towards all of our neighbors. And by doing that, we love God. And by loving God, we love our neighbors. So it's kind of like a very almost logical litmus test where we're at. We have issues with our friends and family members or co-workers. If we trample on the earth and if we hate animals and we mistreat them, we know we don't quite love God enough yet. So then, in item 8 to 9, once again, Allan Kardec reiterates that without charity there is no salvation is the universal principle. It gives all of us access to supreme happiness. It's actually the key to our supreme happiness. Again, it's so simple. We don't even have to remember much. We don't have to learn that much. Here it is. It's all in a nutshell. And of course, everything else that we're learning and reading and studying helps us to flesh it out. But here we've reached the core. Without charity, there is no salvation. Expresses, mandates the equality of all of us before God. We're all brothers and sisters. And we can't love our neighbors without loving God. And we are asked to love God above all else and our neighbor as ourselves. Furthermore, in item 9, he says that without charity, there is no salvation, is a maxim that's based in inclusivity. That means there is no discrimination. We just heard on this page. It's a universal principle. That means it's spread throughout the universe. And it expresses the equality before God of all of us. We're all equal. Even the tiniest little worm has its work and its destiny, its importance, its very important role, and is loved by God as much as you and I. So, of course, then without charity, there is no salvation is an inclusive maxim. Ultimately, we won't fight. It's a supreme happiness. We really, truly know we're all equal. However, when we say there is no salvation without the church, what happens then? It is an exclusive maxim, because then my church is better than yours, for example. And right there, we are at a war. The next thing is there is no salvation without the truth. Again, that's exclusive, because who really has the handle on the truth? Without charity, there is no salvation. There is no exclusion. It's inclusive. It's all of us. And lastly, when we say there is no salvation without Spiritism, again, we say, okay, Spiritism is different or better and more evolved and whatever than your religion or your spiritual path. It's exclusive. Then we're putting ourselves on the pedestal. We're excluding ourselves because of our doctrines or in church's dogmas from you, from our neighbors. And that's not charitable, right? And it's not humble. So let us scratch the maxims. There is no salvation without the church, or there is no salvation without the truth, or there is no salvation without Spiritism. And this we find in item 8 to 9, very clearly described by Allan Kardec. So you invited to read it. But now let us move on to item 10. Item 10 is now the actual Spirit's teaching of chapter 15, and it is by the Apostle Paul. And since it's short, we'll read most of it, pretty much. So he says, without charity, there is no salvation. My children, in the maxim, without charity, there is no salvation, are contained the destinies of men and women. So our destinies are included in the maxim, without charity, there is no salvation. How so? How come our destinies are included in that? Let us look. Let us listen. He says, on earth, because in the shadow of this banner, they will live in peace. So in other words, when we practice without charity, there is no salvation. When we focus on practicing charity from morning till night and even during the night hours, then we will be living in peace. In heaven, and that's on earth. And in heaven, what happens when we've been diligently practicing without charity, there is no salvation, namely charity, then we will find grace before God. So there's a twofold, there's no losing. If we focus on charity, and in particular, of course, it's almsgiving, but we're particularly invited to focus on the moral charity. The moral charity is the one that challenges us the most. It starts from kind thoughts. It means we're keeping our mouth a little bit sealed when unkind thoughts and words come, wanting to come through it. It means a pat on the shoulder, a kind smile, always looking out to see who we can support and where we can help. And of course, also in our minds, through prayers, through positive thoughts, positive visions, having faith always, and envisioning the best ever outcome. So on earth, we will be living in peace when we focus on charity. And then when we discarnate in so-called heaven, we will be finding grace before God, according to Paul the Apostle. Then he continues, this motto is the heavenly light, the luminous pillar that guides us, through the desert of life in order to lead them to the promised land. So charity is the pillar that guides us through the desert of life. It helps us. It makes our life more fulfilling, more peaceful, happier. By giving, we receive. And it will lead us to the promised land. It shines in heaven like a saintly halo around the brows of the elect. This is how it shows up when we're discarnated and we've lived a charitable life. We will be displaying a halo. Go to the right, you who are blessed of my Father, Jesus will say. You will recognize them by the fragrance of charity that they spread around them. If we practice charity, then we will have a fragrance of charity around us. How beautiful. Can we imagine that? A fragrance of charity. Nothing better expresses Jesus' thought. Nothing better sums up the duties of men and women than the maxim of living of divine order. So, without charity, there is no salvation. By practicing charity, we are fulfilling all of our duties. We're doing it. And it is the maxim of divine order. This universe was created by God with harmony and beauty, most and foremost. And harmony and beauty is order. And order is also charity. Spiritism could not prove its origin in any better way than by providing it as a rule, because it is the reflection of the purest Christianity. So this maxim is the maxim of order, and it reflects Christianity in its most pure form. So beautiful, friends. It's so beautiful. Charity. With such a guide, people will never become lost. So, my friends, apply yourselves to grasping its profound meaning and consequences, and to discovering for yourselves all its applications. And that is where the rubber meets the road, right? So it's all wonderful to have the concept in our heads, in our minds, but where and how are we applying it every minute of our days? He says, the profound meaning and consequences of charity. And the consequences, of course, is because of the law of cause and effect. As we give charity, then we will be reaching this halo. We will be recognized on the other side. We will be living in perfect harmony and happiness. It will be at the core of our inner transformation, of our advancement. So, we need to discover all the different applications of charity. And perhaps that can be our homework, to make a list of how can I be more charitable, or for the next day, how can I be charitable, to making that really the center of our everyday life. Let us continue, friends. So, my friends, apply yourselves to grasping its profound meaning and consequences, and to discovering for yourselves all its applications. Submit all your actions to the test of charity, and your conscience will respond to you. And that is perfect. Let us catch ourselves. Let us be the observer, even already during the day. And of course, every night during the nightly review, to see how we've done, how we've applied ourselves, how charitable we have been. And without beating ourselves up and getting down on ourselves, let's just recognize where improvement is necessary. Let us be diligent in that practice. So let us submit all of our actions to the test of charity. Same with the golden rule, which is intimately linked. If we run all of our thoughts, our feelings, our words and actions through the maxim, without charity there is no salvation, and of course the golden rule, then we will be loving God above all else and our neighbors as ourselves. Not only will it help you to avoid practicing evil, but it will lead you to practice the good, for not to have a negative virtue is not enough. So it is necessary to practice the good. It is an action. Our will needs to be engaged. In order to practice the good, he says, the action of the will is always necessary. He says that. The action of it's an activity. Whereas in order not to practice evil, so when we don't practice evil, idleness and negligence are often enough. So this is really important, because how often may we think that spending a Sunday watching a few uplifting programs is enough? And we're not criticizing it. There's a time and place for certain things, but it is a form of idleness. And are we really truly practicing the good by doing that? You could argue, yeah, because it's uplifting my thoughts. But can we do better than that? Can we apply our will more towards the good? Become more charitable? So once again, idleness and negligence are often enough to not practice evil, but then we have not yet done the good. And let us remember, dear friends, we will be responsible for all the evil we've done, but also for all the good we've omitted from doing by being negligent and lazy. So our responsibility, our circle of responsibility is far-reaching. And he's really alluding to that. Then he says, my friends, give thanks to God, who has allowed you to enjoy the light of Spiritism. Not because those who possess this enlightenment are the only ones who will be saved, that's important, but because in helping you to understand Christ's teachings more fully, it makes you better Christians. So here he is basically warning us not to become exclusive, not to think we've got the better silver spoon or the only silver spoon. No, Spiritism doesn't give us that key. But what Spiritism helps us with is understanding Jesus better, to become a better Christian, because it's so clear. Everything is laid out. We're being spoon-fed the good. Our guideposts are all there. Our roadmap is laid out. And right now we're in the core of the citadel, of the maze, and that's charity. So make every effort so that when others observe you, they can say that the true Spiritist and the true Christian are one and the same thing. For all who practice charity are Jesus's disciples, whatever the denomination to which they belong. And there he's taking out the exclusivity again, right? Without the church, there is no salvation. We'll scratch that. Doesn't matter whether we're Spiritists or anything else. It doesn't matter what denomination we belong to. As long as we follow Jesus's modeling and teachings, then we are good Christians, no matter what church belief we're following. All who practice charity are Jesus's disciples, dear friends. So beautifully inclusive. It takes down all the walls on more than one level. And not only the walls among us incarnates, but also between us incarnates and discarnates, and among discarnates, and between discarnates and incarnates. And of course, God and God, we're all part of God. We love God above all else because we love everyone else. And that we do by practicing charity. Dear friends, it's so simple, right? And it's yet so difficult. This completes our study for today. Next week, we will be studying chapter 16, so God willing. And it is entitled, You Cannot Serve Both God and Mammon. Dear friends, we're wishing you a beautiful new week, a very charitable new week, making a list of how we can become more charitable, particularly the moral charity. God bless you.